Thank you guys all for coming tonight. This just proves one thing, that we need to have the main topic of every meeting be a natural disaster. So then we'll get more than 15 people here. But anyway, thank you guys for coming out tonight. We're going to take care of a little bit, about 5 minutes of housekeeping work first. Then we're going to turn it over to our neighborhood's new best friend with the city, Alicia Gerard. So, and you'll find out why she's our new best friend here in a little while. This is going to be just the first of many meetings we're going to have on this, because this is not an issue that's going to get solved tonight or get solved in the next month or the next 6 months. This is an issue that the city has been working on for a long time, and Alicia will explain what processes and what's been going on with that. We're going to talk mostly about creek flooding tonight. A couple of questions have already come up about street flooding and so forth, but it's a subject that's been near and dear to my heart since, especially, was it 4 years ago, since our 2010 flood, and then the last year or so I've been in communication with Alicia and others at the city about what we can do to resolve this, and they've been working hard on this. So again, in the interest of time, I want to try to stay on topic as you guys ask questions after Alicia has talked a little bit. I'm going to talk for like 5 minutes about the insurance issue, and that's not going to be the main topic of tonight, okay? And the reason it's not going to be the main topic of tonight is because the flood insurance program right now is like trying to pin it down is like trying to nail Jell-O, okay? Because every time you turn around, something's changing on it. Congress is monkeying with it. They make it bad, they make it better, they make it bad, they make it better. We can't figure out where it's going yet. What I can tell you is about where it's at right now. So some of those, you may remember, it was year before last, you had the Bigger Waters Flood Act, which basically Congress, when they were asleep at night and not thinking, they just put into play everybody's flood insurance was going to go up to what the actuarial rates were, non-subsidized rates. Then those of you that have been paying insurance, how many got that notice where their flood insurance went like sky high? Not many of you? There were a few. Oh, there's a couple of you. A few people here did. Apologize, let me turn this phone down before it goes off on me and I have to pay a $50 fine. $50 fine if your phone goes off. Everybody's reaching their pocket. The flood insurance, and then they came back and they unwound it a little bit, said, okay, it's going to go up for all commercial, but if you're a homeowner and you're homesteaded, it's going to go back to its original rate, but then it's going to increase over the next 5 years a maximum of 18%, I think it was 18% a year, maximum of 18% a year. Now, I don't know if you do the math on it, but if your flood insurance is $2,000 a year right now, in 5 years it's going to be $4,000 more at that rate. So we don't know where it's going. What we do know is if you own a home right now and you decide to sell your home, the new homeowner, if they are purchasing that property as their primary homestead, can grandfather your current rate in. Now, it has to go through your current insurance provider. So there's been people that may or may not be considering selling and worried about it being in a floodplain. Apparently hasn't been an issue because houses in the neighborhood in the floodplain have been selling at just as good a prices as those that are not in the floodplain. So right now it doesn't appear to be an issue, but it could be. But that's just a note that somebody buying your house can get your rate as long as it's going to be their homestead. If it's turning it into a rental property, their rates are going to immediately go to whatever the actuarial rate is, which, you know, on a $200,000 home, $250,000 home is going to be about $8-9 grand a year. Okay?
It depends on how far in the floodplain.
Well, true, and it depends on how far in the floodplain you are. I mean, we have houses
on the depth, and so
that are, 6 inches below base flood elevation. We have others that are 4 feet below base flood elevation. So it'll depend on that. But again, it's all over the map right now. Yes, sir.
Mike, touch on repetitive loss.
Well, again, and you have severe repetitive loss because I think that's, isn't it 4 losses?
It depends on what part of the program they're changing the definition.
Oh, they're changing the definition too, which is why we don't want to get too far into it. Because if you do have a home that is severe repetitive loss, which means you've had 4 flood claims ever, not in any time frame, but ever, you fall into that category and then you're not eligible for subsidies. But again, the insurance part of this thing is going to be fluid over the next year. And I just encourage you to stay in touch with your federal legislators on this. Because that's where the National Flood Insurance Program comes from, FEMA. So stay in touch with your legislators, and that's where the help's going to come from there. So So the flip side of the coin on the flood issue is, can we fix the flooding itself and not have to worry about the flood insurance issue, which would be the ideal situation? And obviously there are some solutions to that. And that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Alicia and let her talk here a little while. Now again, we're not going to be here all night. I'm going to kind of watch, and we're going to cut off at a time, and then we're going to do some question and answer, and I'm going to kind of listen for off-topic or repetitive questions and so forth, but because we could go all night, I promise you. So I'm going to let Alicia start talking here and tell you what's going on and how they're trying to solve this issue, and then we'll go from there. I think we're on. Hopefully, yeah, we're on. So.
Thanks, Mike. Okay. Wow, so there's some interest tonight. Can I do a quick poll? Who's been here less than 5 years in this neighborhood? Oh, surprisingly, quite a few of you. Yeah, welcome to the neighborhood with a couple quick little flash floods, right, that came through. How many of you guys have been here more than 15 years? Right? So what, you've seen three good ones that have come through? Anybody been here 20 plus? Yeah, you've seen the granddaddies, all the ones that we've had come through. All right, so not a new problem. We all know it's there. This neighborhood was built a long time ago in what they call pre-firm, before we even had flood maps, before there was a whole lot of Cedar Park and Austin and everybody else upstream sending water, right? This has been a challenge going on for some time. As Mike talked about with the flood insurance, that program in FEMA, they're not designed to fix stuff, they're designed to insure stuff. One of the things they have had in the past is a map. Maps are sometimes good, sometimes bad, but they're for the insurance map. They're not great. So you're going to see this. It's not a lot of detail. Don't worry about what you can see from back there. We can look at it later. This is roughly your neighborhood through here, okay? This is McNeil. This is 45. This is Loop 1. Here's IH-35. So this is what we're going to focus on. I'm going to show you, and this is going to change. And the reason I zoomed out so far, this is Round Rock city limits, the blue. This is Round Rock's ETJ that one day maybe we can annex, have some control over. That's the green. Then there's all the waterways that drain downstream and target right at you guys. Okay? So that's what we want to focus on. There's a whole lot of waterways coming down this way. Even though that we know there has been a problem, it's been very difficult to get our hands around precisely what is that problem and how do you fix it. And if you can't accurately model the problem, you can't figure out how to solve it. Right? It's easy to say in the big thing, we need to try to hold some water back. Let's address a few things that we can't do. We cannot make a bigger channel and fit all the water in. The only way to do that would be like take out rows and rows of, like you just can't build a big enough channel. Maybe what we could do is build a big enough Waller Creek tunnel, right? We're talking this is a massive amount of water to fix this issue. Most of the homes here, when Mike talks about the floodplain, what we're usually talking about, you're in the 1%, and this is going to be a hard thing. We're trying to change technology or terminology just to make it fun. You're used to hearing 100-year flood. And FEMA and lots of other people felt like, well, people hear that term and they think, well, I got flooded. I'm not going to get flooded again for another 100 years. That's not actually what that term means. And so they're trying to convert everybody over to calling it the 1% flood. It's the 1% annual chance that you're going to have a flood. The goal is to have everybody outside of that 1% annual chance floodplain. And in Round Rock, we don't just look at where the floodplain is today. We look at when everybody upstream of you paves, even the things we can't control, where's the floodplain going to be in the future? So when we build new stuff, we try to get everybody outside of that 1%. So that in any given year, it's got to be a flood that's less likely than a 1% to happen, right? So we're trying to lower the risk. The reality in Round Rock West, one of the confusing parts, and then I met with some neighborhood leaders 2 years ago to figure out, we got lost in the terminology. People were like, I've been flooded multiple times in the last 30 years. Okay, so remember, it's a 1% chance. You can have greater floods than that. You can have more frequent every year. It doesn't, remember, it's like a slot machine. As much as you think it's on a streak, it's not. It changes every year. But the reality is a lot of the houses in Round Rock West are in what they call the 10% floodplain. That means you've got a 10% chance every year of being flooded. Remember who was here 25 years or 30 years or more? And how many of them got in a flood just about every 10 years? That's what we're trying to combat. So our first bit of trying to get a handle on that was to get an accurate study. These floodplain maps that you see are the ones that were done by FEMA back when we originally got some mapping. And they were updated 5 or 6 years ago, but they really didn't update the science. What they updated was a little bit of the boundaries, who put new streets in. But for the most part, these are the floodplain maps. And anybody here live on Hunlac? that area over there, there's a whole lot of houses, for example, in Hunlac, they're shown in the floodplain. They're not. That water doesn't go there. It goes a different direction. But just the same way, we've got houses that aren't shown in the floodplain that are flooding. Okay? So one of the first things was to get a very good detailed study. And that is very, very expensive and complex, because we can't just stop and look at Round Rock West. We need to look at all this stuff coming upstream, and what are they sending us all the way back. After Hermine happened, there's a group here that we all pay taxes to called the Upper Brushy Creek WCID. Big name. They manage all those earthen structures that you see around the dams. So there's one at Old Settlers Park. There's one, if you ever played golf out at Avery Ranch, there's a giant one, Dam 7, that's down there right by Palmer Lane. There's one just upstream of you guys called Dam 9. There's another one upstream of you called Dam 8. Okay, so they manage all of those dams. When Hermine hit, and believe it or not, we didn't get Hermine rain in Round Rock. We just got Hermine water, right? For the most part, it rained like heck upstream of us, and the water came rushing downstream. After Hermine hit, that board had the foresight. They've had a tax in place for the last, I don't know, 5+ years. And the idea was they had to modernize these structures. These structures were built like in the 50s, okay? And they were built to be some flood control structures, but a long time ago based on old conditions. And part of what they had to do was modernize these structures so they would stay put if we had kind of what we call the probable maximum flood, the NOAA flood. So they were finishing that up, and they're pretty close to being done. And when Hermine hit, they're like, holy cow, regardless of having all these dams in place, regardless of modernizing these dams, we still got a whole lot of doggone people are getting flooded, and flooded catastrophically.
Those who may not have been familiar, Hermine was the 2010 storm.
So September 2010, okay, was the reason we call it Hermine is it was from a tropical storm. That's usually when we get the worst of it here. That tropical storm rotated around, landed on Cedar Park, and just camped. And it all sent it our way. So they looked at it and they said, there's got to be something more we can do. And they stepped up and they decided, you know what? These models that we have, at best, are outdated. At worst, are inaccurate. They stepped up and pursued some grants and chipped in a whole lot of their money. And what they've been working on, and Mike's been trying to get me here, but I've been waiting for it to get to a kind of a final stage. They wanted to do what you call a flood protection study, all right? Flood protection planning. We know we're flooding. What can we do about the flooding? The first step of that is to get a model. So they spent over $1.2 million modeling what we call the whole Upper Brushy Creek watershed, right? That's all of pretty much what Round Rock's in, with the exception of our little bit of Travis County. That goes all the way back to Leander, parts of Cedar Park, down here into Austin, and runs all the way out down to Hutto, okay? So they built this brand new fancy model, and they've been working on this, and it's brand new topography, which is really important to us, because one of the things that happens in the quarry is it moves around a lot. So when you're trying to do a flow path through a quarry, well, the hole was here 6 months ago, and now the hole's over here. So we put brand new mapping, we got updated survey. FEMA was working on a process. We said, no, skip that, let's do this, let's do a brand new model. We're in the process of finalizing that model and doing some QA/QC, and we'll talk about mapping afterwards. What that model allows us to do, though, is, to you guys, somewhat define the obvious, but sometimes you have to define the problem to get some momentum around it. These red spots here, which I think even in the cheap seats back there you can see, this is Round Rock West. Surprise, surprise, when we modeled from Leander all the way down to Hutto, and we said, what are the biggest damage centers, the areas that get the most flooding, happens frequently, or happens at a lot of depth, or combined, where are the worst areas in the watershed? We're in it. No surprise, right? Getting that model, though, was the first step. We got this problem defined now, and we can talk about and quantify thing. And as you can see, we've got waterways coming in. We've got a waterway coming in this way. We've got a waterway coming through here that's Dam 9. We've got a waterway coming through here, Dam 8, and then we've got a big one coming through here. Basically, our problems come through. If there isn't an existing dam from WCID, we have problems. Right? That's where all that water's coming. Their dams are doing a darn good job. Or a damn good job, pun intended. They work. They hold the...
If you decide to take the damn tour.
Yeah. They work, and they do their job, okay? They're just, for the most part, big earthen piles of dirt that hold a whole lot of water back, and then they let it real slow through a pipe. There's no floodgates. There's not a whole lot of technology. It's simplicity, and it just works. Problem is, we don't have dams everywhere. So we started this process to figure out, okay, if we define all this, what do we need to do? And we've got people really underwater. And we've heard over the years, well, can we remove the brush out of the creek? Would that keep me from flooding? Can we just channelize it some more? Or I saw in Austin where they built a culvert. No, it is a big, big problem. So there's 2 major waterways that we're going to focus on, and 2 big doggone projects that are going to get us there. Going through the study, what they figured out, some very fancy engineering and modeling, is there are two projects, which we'll talk about tonight, the Dam 9 project and Dam 101 project. Nobody's paid for it yet. We haven't had that commitment. The first step is figuring out what it is, okay? So we've come up with two projects that if those two projects are done, they have the capability to take every house in Round Rock West out of the floodplain. Not your property, but your house, okay? So there's a difference. So some of you guys you own all the way to the back of the creek, you are still gonna have flood water on your back property if this works. If we got the ideal and we got these projects built, the houses would be out. So regardless what's happening in Congress, right, that's the best solution. Let's get the doggone houses out of the floodplain. This is the lottery hit. This is what we're trying to do. This is hard, this is expensive, this is complicated. And if I made everything magically work exactly how I wanted it to work, and I didn't have problems in federal permitting, and people wanted to pay for it, and I started tomorrow, I still can't break ground until at least summer 2017. So keep that in mind. It takes a while to do these things. So let's talk about what we're talking about. How do we solve this? Two big projects, two big partners. The Upper Brushy Creek WCID, which I'm just going to call WCID because it's a really long name. Our friends at the dam business and the city of Round Rock have been talking about how do we get this done. Last week, we put what they call a memorandum of understanding, the very baby first step, very tentative handshakes of, hey, you want to do this? You want to take a shot? Should we try to build these projects? And very tentatively, the district said, yeah, we'll work with you. I'm taking that agreement to council next week. We expect it to go through council very tentatively. Here's the first steps. And the concept would be this first project, which we originally identified as low-hanging fruit, and the district stepped up and said, you know what, I'm going to jump on that. I'm going to do it. The solution is there's a tributary that comes through here, and if you've ever gone through at any of these flooding events, if you go through McNeil, it's underwater. If you go through the state did us a great favor, built some frontage roads, they're underwater. There's a whole lot of water that's supposed to run, go under McNeil, hang a left turn. You'll see, if you actually look down there, we built a diversion years and years ago and shoved it into a quarry. It leaks out now because of all the construction work that's been done and various things, and it was never quite big as it needed to be. So they came up with a solution that if we build another dam, what we're calling 102, little baby dam, and by the way, if any of y'all don't know, this huge gray area, pretty much everything you can see on the map, I know you people in the cheap seats can't see it all, but just trust me, pretty much all of this area, one big property owner, right? That's all the Robinson Family Ranch, Austin White Lime. The good news is there's been preliminary conversations. They understand. They've been here a real long time too, folks. They get it. And the one thing is, it's not them. They're not out there paving shopping malls. They're not the ones sending the water to you. They're willing to have conversations and talk through and what we can do. So the first step that we're looking at is a project that the WCID, the way the MOUs are set up today, the district would do a project that would involve building a little dam back on their property before McNeil. Let's hold as much water before we even get to McNeil. And then whatever water we get through, let's go ahead and tie it back into that existing Dam 9. That existing dam has room. So the best thing and the cheapest thing you can always do is just shove water in an existing dam. So this is kind of a combination of a hodgepodge of things. The district's like, yes, we want to do this. We want to make the first step. They've got their hands full. They're modernizing some other structures, but they're like, we think we could start with this. The other big one, and they don't work without each other, is what we call Dam 101, okay? This is a massive, full-size dam. This is as big as any of their other dams. It's building a dam from scratch. Again, out on the Robinson's property. Nice big round circles because this isn't precise. All we've done enough is put it in a model and go, how big would it need to be? Can we fit it? We've done some preliminary looking is, we put it in there, we can't flood anybody else, right? So we don't want to put a dam in and save you guys and then backwater across O'Connor or some of those other things. So preliminarily, we know it works. So in the agreement, the city would take the lead on 101. Just means we're coordinating project management. Regardless of who ends up in the driver's seat, the idea is that we would work together step by step, because all of these projects, and a little project that I'll mention a little bit later called the North Quarry Project, they're all on the Robinson property. It's all one landowner. This one may or may not turn into a project, may or may not ever happen, may or may not be a city project. Maybe the landowner wants to do it one day if and when they ever develop.
Is that the current place where they're digging out right now, or quarry?
There's an existing quarry there. Some of it's kind of on the city property. If you've ever been back to get
Last
Bush,
month they've been blasting over there behind there. Is that,
they're blasting a little bit further down here.
that's a general area.
Yeah. So this is kind of a little bit farther up. I don't think they've been quarrying up in that area for a little while. This is kind of behind our Deepwood Recycling.
West Creek Loop, they're quarrying there behind, between those two.
So I think they're quarrying here. This is an existing quarry.
So Alicia, is that what we're calling the Robinson Pits primarily?
I'm not sure.
What's that?
He said, is that what we're calling the Robinson Pits? They have lots of holes out there, so I'm not sure which ones you call which.
Well, they've been diverting floodwaters there for 20 years.
Yeah, there's some existing ones that we've divert, like this water here, not real on the FEMA map.
That's not where they're mining now. This is new mining.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
We always discuss the quote Robinson Pits.
That's probably.
Claim that's where our floodwater goes.
Right, and it does, right, to a certain
I
amount.
understand we never have had a firm agreement with City and Robinson at all. It's just a gentleman's agreement.
Right, so there's a diversion back here, and there's a diversion back here that the Robinsons let us do years and years ago. Like, hey, can you just take some of this water out on your big, rocky space? And those work somewhat. But the reality is the amount of water we're talking, and even if this works, this giant monster coming down, there's nothing contained in it, okay? So what's the next step in kind of going through this process? That's what Mike's been like, when are you coming to talk to us? The next step is trying to find funding, okay? I can't speak on behalf of the council, but I know they're very interested in this. The mayor's been around a really long time. He knows what's happening here. Most of our council members, whether they've been on council for a long time, they've been in this area. They know, right? We had a meeting back, it was during South by Southwest, during March, when we met with the city and the district and the county and a few other people, just talking about preliminarily, and everybody wants to know what's the price tag and how we're going to do it. So the first step that we wanted to get through was to get these refined. We now have them. We now know what the projects are. We now have ballpark ideas of what they're going to cost. We now have general ideas that the landowner is willing to discuss them with us and willing to work through them. And the reason that we want to bring the North Quarry project in, even if it doesn't happen, is we're trying to work these. There's going to be some juggling. There's some land they don't have any interest in developing. They don't want to do that. That's not really what their speed is. But one day, generations from now, they could develop. So they want to keep the impact on their land as small as possible. And so part of what we may be doing is juggling with them about make this one a little bit smaller, make that one a little bit bigger. The end result is what we care about. How it's actually done between the three doesn't really matter. Okay. So the district approved the MOU. Basically said, we're not sure yet who's going to pay for it, but we agree on how to proceed. We need to go get an engineer. We're going to start lining these steps up coincidentally. We need to go start looking into environmental. That's when things get difficult. So remember this green line, Round Rock's jurisdiction. Anybody want to take a guess who's on the other side of that green line?
Awesome.
Anybody want to guess who's harder to permit through? Yeah. So we've started that conversation very preliminarily of like, hey, we're probably not naive enough to think they're going to help chip in, but can you just not make it hard? Can you just not make it miserable for us or the property owner such that he doesn't want to participate with us? So far so good. But they have a giant election coming up in November and it may all go to chaos. So we're trying to get a few things discussed down the way before that gets too far. So we will have to permit through City of Austin. We have to work it out with the landowner. We are going to have to work through U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Salamanders out in this territory just got listed. We are over the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone. We're going to have to deal with that. We are going to be doing a regulatory dam, so we're going to have to deal with FEMA, the Corps of Engineers, and TCEQ. This is why that timeline gets so long that even if I start yesterday, we're figuring it's a good 18 months of permitting. That being said, we're starting yesterday. We're trying to take as many of these tasks and just jam them together. What can I do right now? That's why we're here talking to you guys, because we wanted to start the ball rolling. It's early. I can't bring you a picture today. I can't say you're in, you're out. I can't say for sure what it's going to be. But we want to start this conversation and let y'all know what's happening and get the word out. Because that next thing, as soon as council gets this MOU and presumably says, yeah, preliminarily, yeah, we want to do these projects too. Let's talk. The next big step is what they call interlocal agreements. Okay, so the MOU is a little happy, we're good. That's where the rubber meets the road. Who's going to do what? Who's going to pay what? When are you going to pay it? Those kind of topics, right? We've had preliminary discussions on those kind of topics. The other part is how do we loop into our other partners? Who else can help us? And Mike's got his hand out for your shed. I'm going to be running around with my hat with anybody who wants to toss in, right? Is the federal guys want to throw anything in? Can we get anything from the state? We'll take all comers. This is a big doggone project. It's one of the biggest projects we have. Ballpark right now, this project alone, without any land costs, and the Robinsons are nice, but they're not going to give us the land. Without any land costs, this is a $16 million project, just 101, okay? So this is some big money. Part of what we're going to have to do is go around and explain Why should all this big money be spent?
What's the total?
Without any land, right now, 21, okay? We don't know what the land situation, and that's kind of like no money on North Quarry. Right now, we're not sure we need to do anything from North Quarry. If we just keep it a quarry, it does a pretty good job. We may need to do a relief channel. It likes to just kind of burp all over the school and make a big mess when it does float out, or sometimes it politely comes out of the inlets and into the street. If anybody was here during Hermine, and then the inlets become outlets and it runs down Deepwood and then it re-enters the channel. It would be nice to organize that. Right now, I'm naive enough to go after the big fish. How do we get the big thing done? So we're going to go through. Yes, sir.
Real quick, I don't know the statistics, but about how many households, like this, how many households along with
That's a great question.
I'm just not like West, but this whole thing you're describing that.
So what's interesting in the new maps, and I'm not committed to those yet because we haven't QA'd, in your area, kind of getting up through 35, there's just under 70 households, okay? There are some households further downstream that even if we do this amazing stuff, probably still don't get them all the way out. Some stuff way down. If you've ever been through Burnett likes to go underwater pretty often. There's some stuff down there that I don't know if we can quite get. The goal is to look at these big ones, and if we put this giant stream, and this thing's so big that it actually makes a little bit of a blip on Brushy Creek. We have to hold so much water back on Lake Creek to protect the homes, it actually makes a little blip on Brushy. But that's the goal. So when you look at this, say it's 70 homes, right? Beyond just what does a home cost, there's just the intrinsic value of a neighborhood, and a long-established neighborhood where there's a community. So, right now I don't know that anybody's looking at, well, what's this dollar compared to that dollar? But there is going to be some discussion, especially people who don't live here, right? That aren't dealing with this every 10 years. So those are some of the challenges that the big policymakers and the people who actually control the checkbook are going to have to look through as we go forward. What we've put together is, this is how we think we can fix it. And if we can't get everybody, we can get doggone close. And as Mark talked about, it's going to go to actuarial rates. So it really does matter if your floodplain is here or if your floodplain is down at your ankles. It really does matter. And then for peace of mind, it kind of matters too, to know, well, in the 1%. The one thing I can tell you is if magically I pull this off, and the city and the district, if they pull it off, if they get it together and the neighborhood gets this done, that doesn't mean you'll never flood again, right? There's always a bigger flood. There has to be a threshold we plan for. We are trying to get you guys to the same threshold we use kind of throughout the city. It's kind of that expectation of that 1%, that 100-year floodplain. Let's try to get to that threshold. That doesn't mean there's not going to be a bigger storm. We have folks on the east side of town that got flooded in Halloween. They're not anywhere near the floodplain. I've got some folks that a lady I talked to earlier, there's still street flooding, right? There's still some things that happen from the front. There's always a bigger storm. But if we can do this, we can reduce that annual risk, right? That will go down from, you got a 1 in 10 shot to 1 in 100. And I think most of us would take it, So we got a long way to go. That's why I wanted to tell Mike that this isn't going to be the last you see of me. That next step is to go talk to council, and then it's to get in the nitty-gritty of those ILAs. Presumably we'll go forward. At the same time, we're going to start working on selecting our design engineer. One of the things that we want to do in lock and step with the district is all of these projects are on the same property owner, so it makes sense to coordinate with them once. It makes sense to work with City of Austin once. So we're going to try to double up on a lot of our environmental work. We're going to try to simplify the conversations with the landowner, because that's who's going to make this work. We're going to try to minimize the amount of duplicate work that we're doing, which may mean we end up with 1 engineer, it may end up with 2. But either way, we're going to be spending a lot of quality time together, and we have up until this point. And so that's the short version, right? Really big projects to fix it, but it's tenable. So kind of what I want to see is the next step as we go forward is that we can get these ILAs going, these interlocal agreements, right? That's where the very detailed thing is. There'll be one between us and the district, and ideally there'd be one between us and everybody else who wants to chip in. So the county or whoever else we can get to contribute. We've got to figure out a way to fund all these things. Because I can tell you, as a little bitty drainage program, we don't get the big money. People want to build highways. They don't think about this. So it's not all there. So we've got to get creative on how we fund this. The other part is just, it's a lot of money that has to go out all at once. Usually these kind of things you can pay off in debt. The district isn't somebody who can do the debt. The drainage utility is really small. So we're gonna have to get creative, but we're gonna go talk to the council, see if we can get this first step done, and then we're gonna do those ILAs. And so what we'll be doing is we'll be updating from Mike, and then if we get those locked in, then we'll come right back and start talking to you guys about, okay, what does that really mean in timeline? And what does it mean for you guys that maybe you're in other areas and those kind of things? I'm gonna have to come back at some point when we can get this running, and we'll talk about what's going on with the street flooding. Okay, those of you guys, simple way to think about it, I think of street flooding, do you get flooded from the front door? Or is it creek flooding and you get flooded from the back door? Okay, so this is how to hopefully fix most of the back door problems. The reality is, though, the back door problems are so big that it creates some of the front door problems. Because even if you have a pipe, if the pipe's going out and the pipe is 7 feet underwater because the creek's running full, the pipe can't drain. Okay, so we're trying to work on some of these smaller, localized issues. Anybody on Creekview? Yeah. All right. So we've been working on there. We had some folks in the last July storm, and one of the interesting things about street flooding is you may be the one you're flooding, and it's not necessarily the problem that's near your house, right? So one of the things that we had, and I'll see if I wrote down the addresses. So 1900s area, these folks, 1906, 1908, were getting water in the house. And we're trying to figure out what's going on. Had nothing to do with the inlet and the pipe in 1906 and 1908. It had something to do with the two systems upstream of those. So anybody who lives around the Shadowbrook area may have seen our guys have been steadily digging out these pipes, putting new head walls, trying to cut through the creek and make them work. So we've had some very patient folks around, the 1800 kind of one, and I guess 1906 is the area where we were digging in people's backyards and crossing repeatedly. It takes a while. Our crews don't usually do this level of work, but they did it, they finished it. If you're a fan of head walls, they're very beautiful, beautiful head walls. What that means is these two systems upstream will catch the water, and then so the poor guys downstream, because if you live at the bottom, and that's what a lot of you people on Creekview are, you are the bottom before we get to the creek. It doesn't work. So we got that part fixed. We are finishing a project as we speak that we're gonna go bid to fix the area over on, and I might have the addresses right against the park.
On which street?
Creekview at, right around the corner.
Yeah, Creekview by the Greenbelt.
Yeah, Creekview by the Greenbelt. And I'm sorry, I forgot the addresses. Are y'all familiar? It's kind of, there used to be a church there, it's not a church anymore. Maybe it is.
St. William's Loop.
St. William's Loop is where you're talking about the church.
That's where the church is.
No, I'm thinking, okay, so as Creekview crosses the running trail,
Right.
okay, there are two houses that have this very nice spot next to the running trail. They also are very nice next to the culvert that is drastically undersized. So these poor folks have been flooded multiple times. So the other real big nuisance that we hear about a lot is, has anybody ever driven through water in Oak Ridge? Even in what seems like
1102 and 1103 Creekview.
Okay, 1102, 1103 Creekview, there's some small pipes that go into the road, they don't do the job, the water comes over, it runs through surprisingly a lot of water runs through that green belt. So we are gonna replace that with a big box culvert that'll carry the water underneath, which not only helps those two houses, but also one of the things we like to do is keep the water off the roadways. The other one we're gonna work on, and we found a pretty decent solution for, is what's happening in front of the school. If anybody's ever driven through Chisholm Trail Middle School, thank you. So Oak Ridge, for whatever reason, is just kind of a cranky little flooder, and when it floods, it just holds the water for a little while, and it's sometimes surprising to people because it doesn't seem like it rained that much, and the doggone street's holding water. So we've been working with the school district, and we put together a plan, and we think we have an idea of how to punch that water out. So those are bundled in one project that we're hoping to go out to bid here in the next couple weeks. What does that mean? That means somewhere around October, we'll start tearing things up in front of the school and making your life really inconvenient. As soon as we get kind of that stuff done, we're gonna go tear up Creekview. Okay, so you'll see some communication, I'll work through Mike, because in order to do Creekview and not make it take forever, we're probably gonna close Creekview for a little bit because we have to go all the way across the road. One of the things that makes these projects really difficult and challenging when you deal with street flooding is everything else that's in the way. If it was just drainage stuff, my budget would go a lot farther. I could do these things a lot quicker. We're having to move water lines, we're having to deal with dry utilities, we're having to make sure we can fit under, over the wastewater. So that's some of the challenges. Sometimes you feel like you guys have been digging for days and nothing's happened, and that's what we're doing. We were replacing a culvert on Oxford. I don't know if you guys probably don't go over that way very often, but over kind of by Dell, Gaddis School, they had a culvert basically kind of get torn out during Halloween. All the asphalt left. And that was what we had to do. Move a phone line, move a gas line, move a wastewater line, move a water line, then we get to build a culvert, right? So our part was pretty easy. So those are some of the street things we're gonna do. I can tell you those things are coming soon. I can tell you there's nothing right else on its heels. Yes, sir.
The last one you talked about on Creekview, where, in what area of Creekview?
So 1101,
It's a really long.
You know where the grain belt crosses? Okay, Deepwood,
Yeah,
coming west on Creekview.
yeah.
Okay, you got a house on each corner, then you have the green belt, and then you've got two houses past the green belt. It's those two houses on the west side of the green
No,
belt.
but you said after that one, you mentioned you're gonna have to close the street and do some more work.
they're right there. We would have to close Creekview. So even if you don't live there, I bet you a lot of you guys drive through it. So you will see, and we'll be communicating about that, and we'll set up a detour in order to do that. That's the immediate street stuff we're going to try to do. Otherwise, we're going to be trying to focus on these really big things. And then I'll answer your question, and then I want to talk about mapping. Yes, sir.
All right, where are you going to run this water that you are expediting across the creek?
The nice thing about Creekview is there's capacity, and it's not very long. It's the length of a lot, and then you get to Lake
Where are
Creek.
you going to put that water?
We're going to put it where it's always been going,
Lake Creek.
Lake Creek.
I would downstream from this without to improve it, and put more water in that.
We're not putting more water. We're just,
I find this a short-sighted effort here.
and I'd be happy to talk through with very detail. It's not more water. It's the same water. It's just we're trying to keep it from routing over the road. We're trying to put it onto the road. So it's the same amount of water. So we'll talk through it in detail. I'll be happy to do that with you. So the last part of this is one of the great things about wonderful models and really detail and showing you guys all this stuff is can we get new maps? FEMA was doing some micro updates here, and that's one of the reasons I asked about Hunlet, because there's some people over here in the floodplain that aren't in the floodplain, and it always comes up, well, wait, my insurance provider says I'm in the floodplain. Am I not? Am I in? What's the deal? We were able to convince WCID to put out more money, and they're going to take these wonderful models and convert them into brand new floodplain maps. Okay? So they're going to be the most accurate maps that we've ever seen in this area. We're going through the details now of these models. You will start seeing when we get to those, then there's a process for like going out to the public and some public meetings. So keep your eyes out for that. So two different things, right? There's going to be the projects that are going to happen and hopefully make a lot of this floodplain maps go away. But in the meantime, we're going to update the maps so they're at least as accurate as possible. So for those of you guys who are having to deal with flood insurance and you need to know the risk, you want an accurate map so then you can go get an elevation certificate and say, yes, the water is here, not here, lower my rates. Okay? So that's the other part. That takes, it's FEMA. So once we finish our part, it's got to go through that process, but you will see a public hearing process. So in general, that's kind of it. Unfortunately, nothing is happening tomorrow. I wish it was, but we could, yes ma'am.
When do you project the new maps to be completed?
So the new maps will probably be ready to like start the conversations. It's probably looking like January at this point. They have sent some what makes the basis of the maps, which are the detail files. In order to do the study we're doing now, we already knew, we don't need a model. We know where we flood in Round Rock. We should know how to fix it. But to make the maps, they have to be really precise, right? So we're starting that process now with, we asked to do our QA, QC up front. Normally they give them to the cities afterwards and it's kind of all locked in. We're like, no, we want to see the details. And so they're working with us in the county and all the cities to do their detailed analysis to make sure they got every nook and cranny that we know to be the way we want it to be. I can't move the floodplain off of you, but I want it to be accurate as possible. And that's all of our goal. Yes, sir, and then I'll come here.
Are you going to use these new models that you're developing to do a LOMAR request?
So good question. So what would come out of that, instead of doing a LOMR, which is a letter of map provision, which is usually do piece by piece, right? One of the things that FEMA was doing in the map modification was they were going to do kind of a full spotty update for our area and some of the other areas. This new model from Cedar Park all the way down to Hutto will replace that, and it'll be a PMR, okay? So it'll update the whole map, like throw out the maps we got, put brand new ones in place, and not only those maps, but those models behind them. So when development comes in and deals with stuff, then Cedar Park can go, well, let me see what's going to happen downstream. They know what's happening. So it will replace everything.
Review process before it even gets approval from FEMA.
Excuse me?
It's about a year's review process at the earliest. After you do the modeling, it takes about a year to go through the review process at FEMA.
So we're starting to do some of that overlap now with some of our CTP, and we can talk about those schedules. Point is, we are going to get new maps. There's a lot of people that have a lot of inaccurate stuff, and then we'll actually have some real models that back them. One of the frustrating parts was before you'd have this map, and it tells you this information, but you don't actually have the corresponding model. So if you wanted to fix something in your area or you're trying to deal with it, it was goo. But that's what the insurance company is required to work off of, is that map.
Could you clarify something for me, please?
Yeah.
Is this study, that $1.3 million Russian Creek Water Improvement District study you talked about earlier? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So they did the first part, and they had planned to just figure out the projects and stop. And we've got them to work along with us and with all the other floodplain administrators. So Danny Halden, some of y'all may know him. He's our floodplain administrator. He had a family emergency. He couldn't be here tonight. Him, the folks with the county, some of the other folks. Really worked with the district to convince them that it would be in the best community's interest to get this updated stuff. So they're moving forward. And we basically collectively called FEMA and said, hey, stop with what you're doing, because we know there's problems, and we had a lot of comments they didn't address. We would like to do this thing. We want a wholesale change, and we want it to be right. We want updated stuff. So what the land use is, how much impervious cover is out there, what the topography is. So that process will be starting later this year. So you'll start hearing about these simultaneously. We'll be working on the projects, and you'll start hearing about the mapping. And I wanted to go, yes, ma'am.
I'm sure it's a stupid question.
I take all kinds.
And Williamson County is the fastest growing county, I guess, or whatever. So I'm looking at like Highland Horizons being built, and I know there are reservoirs there because I've actually driven back there. Are they making sure that as they keep building out, that it's not just going to be faster and faster and more into these creeks?
So one of the challenges we're dealing with is, like Highland Horizons, some of this stuff is not in the city's jurisdiction. So like all these guys that are upstream. Most of the communities upstream of us, though, do have a requirement that you do detention, or if you participate in a regional program. One of the conversations we're trying to talk to Austin about is apparently they've allowed people to pay kind of fee in lieu in their program, but the only thing downstream is us. Like, there's not always a dam downstream. There's not always a structure. And so one of the things we've been working on with our partners, when Williamson County knows where we stand pretty good. City of Austin's starting to get it. There's a transportation facility. I don't know if some of y'all saw, that's kind of where the weird 620, 45 thing hits. Round Rock ISD just built a transportation facility. And they had submitted plans to the City of Austin and said, hey, we'd like to go what they call regional detention, which is instead of build a pond here, we're just going to let it go and go into the big system. And they said, okay, well, if you can convince Round Rock, go ahead. And we wrote back, yeah, no, not another drop. So the hard part is it really is kind of a sophisticated thing, and it's, people want to go. But if it's just me, I'm not that bad. Well, he's right. If it's just him and it's not that bad, and that drop leaves first. But the reality is it's not just one. It's all of that. So we're going to continue to work with our partners about, now you all know what's happening downstream. Now you know what the problems are. We need you to hold your water where you're making it. But that being said, the one way we can control our destiny is sort of like convincing Congress to fix the Flood Insurance Act. The one way we can control our destiny is this. And this is what we're hoping to get some momentum around with our county and cities and stuff, is if we build these structures, then we can take care of it. We can control what's happening.
Can you get the people upstream to chip in? I mean, is that where you're trying to get some?
We're going to talk to the county. We'll probably tokenly ask Austin. I don't know that we'll get much. And then there's some unincorporated, and there's some weird stuff. There's actually surprisingly a lot of Austin up there in weird forms of what they call limited purpose annexation and some other things. We're going to ask everybody, but we're not going to count on everybody. But we'll take it for anybody who would chip in. The main thing is to get some awareness, and we've started talking to the property owners, but that might be one of the ways that we can maybe make this interesting to them is if and when you want to do something one day, you got to do something with your water. Maybe we can kind of do a joint project to take care of your future and our problems, right? Which is another thing in our best interest to make sure it's done, because we're not going to get to see this in the future. That's going to be somebody else. So we want to do that. And then I saw another hand. Was that you, sir? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so what is the potential actuarial impact of all of this? You're talking about 70 houses. That's the 70 houses that are in the 10%.
No, that's the 70 houses that are in any bit of the 1%.
Repeat the question, please.
Okay, sure. So his question was, what's the actual impact if we do that? And he was asking, I said something about 70 houses being in the 10%. And I guess let me clarify, not all 70 houses are in 10%. Quite a few of them are, though. The folks that are in the floodplain are like fully committed here. They are way in the floodplain. There are some that are on the fringes. If you look at everybody who's in that 1%, it is about 70 houses. Okay, so everybody in that boundary we would normally like to be out of, everybody who's going to be what would be in the updated FEMA map. The goal is to get all of those houses out. So it would be those 70 houses. One of the things, though, beyond those 70 houses, which is also very important to us, is the roadways. Oak Ridge, Round Rock West, and Deepwood. Can we get those, some of them, all of them, to either not go under at all, go under hardly at all. What can we do between the dam projects that are done and maybe fixing the structure? Right now, I couldn't put a bridge in tall enough because I couldn't get it back down to the street. You know, it'd be the only thing up there. It'd be like a hover. But that's the other value to us. So when we go and talk to the county, and when I talk to the council, it's not just the homes. It's not just these 60 people. It's how many, Mike, do you have any idea how many homes total are in Greater Round Rock West?
1,482.
I'm going to take you around with me. This is awesome. Okay, so it's that other 1,482 of which side of the waterway do you live on? Which side of the waterway is the fire station? Which side of the waterway is the ambulance? Which side of the, right? We can't continue to have this go the way it's going. So it's not just the houses. Even if we could get rid of all those houses, we still need to fix the roadways. And right now, it's not even tenable. There's just not a way to do it. Yes.
Commercial impact,
About what?
the commercial properties that are in floodplain.
On this waterway, there's actually not that much. We get well down to the end, and I'd have to look at as we get down to, I guess that used to be Putt-Putt, now it's some parks and stuff like that. To be honest with you, I hadn't been looking that hard at them because the bigger impact was here. Lake Creek running, going forward, there's actually not a whole lot of commercial that's in the floodplain. We get into some stuff kind of down where our park yard is, if some of y'all know where that is, and there's an older house there. But this main waterway, it's primarily Greater Round Rock West. We have some other projects that we're hoping to maybe do with Chisholm Valley. They're the other beautiful red dots. They're as old as you guys, got built before the maps. Some similar problems, not to the level that you guys are seeing.
If I can, I want to, because I kind of heard, we talked about the 70 homes, and there's a lot of big 1,482 that are not in the floodplain. If these 70 homes remain in the floodplain, they will be subject to actuarial flood insurance rates, which means that at some point down the road, the people that own these homes are going to be paying $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 a year in flood insurance, which means that I couldn't afford $12,000 a year in flood insurance and my house payment. Okay, so I'm either going to abandon it, and I'm not going to be able to sell it to anybody. It's going to be that. So I'm either going to abandon it or get foreclosed on, and there goes my property value and my neighbors, and then there goes the overall value in the neighborhood. So it does affect those that are not in the floodplain. So I don't want anybody to get that not in my backyard mindset, because this is important to the whole neighborhood.
Mike, I think that 70 figure's wrong because we had over 88 houses flooded in
Well,
10.
remember what she said, that you can take them all out and you'll still have houses that flood, because we sat down.
Well, the actual floodplain itself, though, is probably 800 or 900 houses.
And the floodplain currently in Round Rock West, per the regulated maps, 155 houses
Total.
total in the Greater Round Rock West neighborhood. It's 155 houses
In a zone AE.
in a zone AE, but that includes all those houses down Hunlac that aren't really in the floodplain because of the diversion. It includes a bunch of
150 in Round Rock West are in the total floodplain of Molecular Creek.
No, Greater Round Rock West, but she's saying if you look, there's about 50 houses over in the 140, 50.
If I remember right, it was
2.25 that could be removed from the floodplain if this study works.
the current FEMA map that shows approximately 150, and again, we can go into this because I don't know if everybody cares about that much detail. But the current FEMA map, it doesn't accurately reflect how many houses are in. In some cases, there are houses that aren't in the FEMA map, in that 150, they're actually should be in the floodplain, and they know it because they've been wet. And then there's houses in that FEMA AE zone that aren't in the floodplain. And so part of what we're trying to reconcile through the figures is through a combination of people who've LOMA'd out, through the new models, that kind of commitment. What we're looking at right now is an actual, what is the topography on the ground? When we run the new models, if they put in these magic things upstream, where does the water look compared to the actual houses? Because I don't want to get too much caught in the FEMA study because we've talked about not the best, right? So is there anybody else who?
Down the top side of Parkview too, there's some on the high side of Parkview that are going to kind of fall into that unlike thing, aren't they?
There may be. I haven't seen the details. And that'll be something, when you see the maps, again, whether you're in or out, if you think you're anywhere near it, make sure you come out and look at those maps. You will see another public meeting. If you can't be there, just get one of your neighbors either side, somebody go, so that you don't accidentally get mapped in or mapped out or whatever direction you didn't want to be. You want to make sure these are as accurate as possible. I can assure you we're trying to do everything to make them as accurate as possible, but when you're doing a whole watershed like they're doing, and that's why we asked to see it, so we can at least zoom in on Round Rock, but we're looking at the whole city. So nobody knows it better than you guys of what's really happening from the creeks in the back, so we want to get that as accurate as possible. Yes, sir?
Saying get mapped in or out, what can we do?
Well, believe it or not, there's still errors, and I'd like to think by the time the city looks at it, we would have taken all those errors and anomaly out. Not perfect, right? One of the realities is we're mapping through 2-foot contours, kind of LiDAR information. We don't always have a precise of what's happening at your house. So if there's something that's happening at one individual's house, it may be something before the study goes forward that we can look at and go, oh, actually, what's happening in his house, he's got a little bit different grading going on in his yard. If it's really close and we can see in the model, like, oh, you're point something in, it may be something we can detail out. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised. I mean, most of everybody said they've been here more than 5 years. You know, I don't think there's going to be that many people surprised that, oh, I'm in the floodplain, or these few blessed few that are going to be like, woohoo, I'm not in anymore. I think most of you it's going to be, yeah, this is what's happened. There may be a few of you that go, wait a minute, I was flooded before and I'm not in, and that's still possible, because no matter what we do, we're modeling one kind of combination of circumstances. It can always rain more. There can always be a different kind of scenario. So
We kind of based it on the last flood.
they use the last flood to do what they call calibrate. There's a standard practice of what the rain in this area is. There's some things you have to follow per FEMA guidelines, and so we're doing that. But one of the things that Round Rock did after Hermine and some of the larger storms is we actually went out and marked what they call high water marks, which is how far did the water come up. Then we got those surveyed, and then they used those to calibrate. So after they made this big model, one of the things they did is, let me go put Hermine rain, and we had lots of data from NOAA, the Weather Service. Let me go make Hermine happen, and does it match the watermarks that Round Rock spray painted and surveyed? That's one way, which is something different than we didn't have in the FEMA model. That's one way to really know how good is it. And they pretty much hit them right on. And it took a little tweaking until we got to that point. But I know we're bumping up on 8 o'clock, Mike. And I don't,
Well, and again, this is a long-term process. When did we first meet? About a year and a half, 2 years ago or something like that?
probably, it's probably been at least...
We started this dialogue a long time ago when I started becoming aware of what was actually around the time of the Biggers Waters Flood Act, Flood Insurance Act, Reform Act, because I started having some clients that were mentioning their flood insurance rates were skyrocketing, and then I started researching and finding out why. And then we sat down with Alicia and Danny Halden, who lives in our neighborhood, who's our city engineer, and Steve Norwood, city manager, and started this dialogue on this. Now, they've been working on it, but we're all involved in this now, and Alicia and I are going to stay in touch. And somebody did ask, are these maps going to be available on the website? Or?
Not just yet. I can probably get you one, though, that you can send out.
Okay, if you can email me one, I'll make sure we'll get it up on our website for you to look at. As information becomes available, we'll try to keep it.
And that's going to be my major point of communication, so you can feel free to get a hold of me. Obviously, there's a lot more of you than I have phones. So you can always reach out to Mike, because my effort's always going to be to push to him whatever we're ready to publish. The reason we have circles and the reason I'm hesitant to put maps out is I don't want anybody to get all attached to Dam 101 being right here and the story change. What I want you to get the concept of is we think there are projects, we're pretty doggone sure, there are projects that can be done that can fix this. They're really expensive, they're really complicated, but we've quantified them. Now we're going to go to the next step to see if we can get some partners to make that happen. And because they're expensive and complicated, it's going to take us a little time.
Well, did you have a question?
Just one more, just an observation. This was a very good presentation. I appreciate it. We've been a little hostile, but we've been sitting here since, 3 years and 11 months since the big flood, and quite frankly, you're really the first person who's wanted to talk to us.
Well, okay, in their defense, we've been communicating back and forth.
Yeah.
General, we've been working on this for dollars.
Yeah, no.
Now.
And if this is hostile, I can't wait to see when y'all are happy.
Have monthly updates or something.
My plan is to get you on a regular update schedule. I would love that monthly updates would be valuable. I would love to have something to report every month. My crazy aggressive schedule is to try to have the ILAs ready by the end of September. I don't know if that's going to happen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start every milestone. So I'm telling y'all your next milestone is these interlocal agreements. I'm going to update Mike when those milestones are going forward so that you can keep up with milestones. Then once I can get a schedule, if I can get that ILA done and I get an engineer, for example, under contract, then I can start charting this out a little bit further so you guys can track with me. Wait a minute, we haven't heard from Alicia, and she was supposed to talk to us back in April.
You get mad at me.
So I'm a realist, but I'm kind of a glass half full kind of guy. So I know the steps that are taking and the processes and the red tape and just the crap that you're having to go through to get this done. One thing that I did like hearing, that in a perfect world, You know, the first shovel goes in the ground in 2017, roughly. You know, if you consider Dam 9 and 101 in a perfect scenario, what does the years play out for those possibly?
Talking about the completed ones they
Yeah,
started?
yeah, I mean, and leaving North Quarry out for now. I mean,
Yeah, so probably
looking
nothing's-
at a perfect world with financing and everything.
Yeah, everybody like whips out their checkbook, right? Yeah. So North Quarry probably, like, we don't need to happen. It's awesome. We just say, hey, leave the hole there, and we just keep working off of that. This Dam 9 guy would start under construction. He wouldn't take to 2017, hopefully. We hope we can start this work because it's a smaller scale, kind of what's happening, less hopefully endangered species kind of in that area. In the perfect world, if we started in the 27, so it would be get an engineer, try to get them under contract by January, right? Get that next step and some kind of commitment out of Austin of how miserable is this going to be, and can we get some commitment? And they've shown some interest. You know, we've talked to the mayor, and there's some other things in place where even the Robinsons have offered to maybe assist with the city because they had to go through that process themselves. So it would be go through that preliminary engineering, at least on 101. The way I would contract with an engineer if I was doing it is to just do the preliminary engineering. Like, I don't want to spend months and months talking about, you know, little bitty details. Let's get the big stuff done, get a scenario, and then let's check in with everybody and figure out where we are.
Jimmy?
And I got one guy squirming up here too.
So what's the answers?
So
When it starts going
Simple, and I'm just-
17?
I mean, like, you want it, like, how it goes beyond that, or?
I'm just saying, if you started in 2017, is it a 3-year project in 20?
Oh, okay. So if we started construction,
That's what
I'm sorry.
And
So, like,
it's not a commitment at all.
yeah, this is probably no more than an 18-month construction job. So the reality is we got to sweat some hurricane seasons going forward. And this is the magic of all miracles. The reason I even bring up summer 2017, I know everybody's going to hold me to it, because I don't want anybody thinking it's going to happen tomorrow. Even if council in the county and everybody agrees to pay for it, it is a tough road to hoe to get this through the permitting. So I don't want anybody to think that's going to happen tomorrow. But once we get through the permitting will likely take longer than the construction.
Okay, thank you.
Back to the original question that I asked, you mentioned that the maps and et cetera will be starting around January. What's the time frame on the expected completion of the maps? And what's the time frame of when those of us that are, like, I'm in AE right now, but my house is not flooded, but next door it was 4 foot under. When will I be able to, what time frame will I be able to expect that I can start doing arbitration on my house?
So there will be a public meeting coming up to kind of finish the flood protection study. You'll see that, and that'll be more the generic one. And then the process is actually run through FEMA. And that I'm probably going to have to get a schedule to Mike to get out to you. I know by the time we think,
6 months, a year, 2 years?
I can tell you we did one on Gillett, and I think this gentleman was hinting at it back. It took us 2 years to get our stuff through FEMA, and nobody was protesting.
But your project, it's got to be done before 2017. You understand that we're going to start the projects?
No, not necessarily. And we won't wait on that process. It's going to be interesting because we've got this weird coincidental thing going on that we're going, hey, this is what we think the model is, but at the same time I want to fix it. In the meantime, review this, and I'm going to change that. And we're not going to let their schedule interfere with ours as much as we can. I will get with Mike. I need to go back and figure out what the flood planning process is. There's been a little bit of juggling. Normally FEMA does 100% of the mapping process. We have had, through the ability with WCID and our partner at Texas Water Development Board, we've had the ability to do a lot of this locally. So we haven't had some dude from FEMA coming down telling us what to do. But it starts making it a little awkward in this handoff, and we're just working that out because one of the things we asked was, before you run off and give it to FEMA to do whatever magical things they're going to do, we want to see that. And that was all the communities in the county. And the district was like, yes, we want to see, we want folks to be happy before they go. So I will follow up with Mike on kind of what we think the projected schedule is, the mapping, because that's an important part. There's kind of 3 parts. The planning project that'll get buttoned up, that'll say, yep, these are the red dots, and yep, somebody needs to do anything. Yeah, no kidding, right? So that not going to be that big of a deal. There's going to be the projects you'll start hearing about that we're going to try to do, and then the third part is going to be what's the mapping? What is the timing? And that's going to make a...
And she'll tell you that I bug her to death on this stuff. I'm always sending her an email, hey, we got anything, hey, we got anything. So I'm going to steal the microphone from you,
Please.
and I'm going to make a couple of quick additional announcements, and you hang around a few minutes.
Yeah.
I know she'll hang around for a few minutes. So one thing, thank you very much. going to go back to the partnership thing that she mentioned earlier, and this is very important because we're also dealing with the mining issue right now. And if y'all remember a while back, I've talked about the mining issue versus the flooding issue. Of the two that I feel is the worst threat to our neighborhood, it's the flooding issue. Because the mining issue will go away in a couple of years. You know, they'll be done with their blasting and they'll be done and gone and go on to another part of the quarry. The flooding will never go away if we don't do anything. So this is where it's important for us. You know, remember when we had that meeting over at the Marriott and everybody had their tar and feathers and we're ready to run the Robinsons out of town on a rail, and that's why I said it's important that we partner with these people because we need them. And this is why we need them right here. So please keep that in mind. And we're not going to get on the mining subject. We'll talk about that next meeting and updates and so forth. But
Mike, is that going to make a bigger hole for floodwater?
Why don't we pay them to quarry in Dam 101? They don't have to go through the permitting process for all the other things, and that's
We've actually discussed some of that with them, and there's some different legality issues with.
well, it has to match the quality of stuff they want. They're not just going to go mine somewhere because they.
Cheaper to pay them to blow it up and take it out.
Well, that's
than to spend
all right, that
$20 million on something that may not happen.
True, but that's logistics. That's like, you know, the fourth thing on our top 3 things we need to worry about right now. Yeah, we talked about that too. All right. If you didn't sign in, was anybody in here does not get our regular neighborhood emails?
I didn't, but I hope I signed it.
Okay, if you signed up on the sheet, we want to keep you updated. We try. I never know because I don't have a way to see who opens, who doesn't open them. I'm just hoping that everybody gets them. I know most of them are lost cats and turtles and ducks and stuff. I get that, okay? But we also get the important stuff out too. Don't forget. If you want to drop a check on the table on the way out toward our shed project, please consider it on the way out. The first meeting of the Salamander Hunting Club will begin once they announce the location. You know, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. That's a joke, okay? That's a joke. If anybody in here from Fish and Wildlife or the federal government, don't come arrest me. That was a joke, okay? And we're going to work on maps and communication. And the public meeting, we're going to find out the date. And the other thing is the dollar. She talks about going around with our handout. Once we determine, once we find out, say, okay, here's what we're going to do and it's going to cost this much, that's when we can start getting on the phone to our county commissioners. We already know this. Pretty much the city of Round Rock's all in. We know that, okay? But we can get the county commissioners, our state legislators, call John Carter, it's Congressman Carter, tell him, and Congressman Carter's office is aware of this because I've been in communication with them all the time about this flood insurance issue going on. So that's another venue. So when we start putting our hand out, I'm not a big one putting hand out for the federal government, but this is our backyard, okay? And if it takes that to get our projects done and save our homes, then so be it. So with that being said, if there's any questions, neighborhood related, not related to this, real quick, I'll answer them and then we'll cut loose and then y'all can hang out and visit or whatever you'd like to do. Any other questions, neighborhood-wise? Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know when they're going to clean up the creek side.
Okay, so cleaning up the creek brings up another. Okay, let me tell you the problem with cleaning up the creek. The majority of the creeks in our neighborhood, the city does not own that property. The property owners own it, and it is their responsibility to clean up the creek. Now they did come through. There are some areas that are easements with the city, but the problem is they have no access to it. They have to come and tear up your yard to get to that part of the creek to clean it out. So if you remember after the Hermine, they did come through here and spent about $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 trying to go through and clean it out as best they could at the time. And it hasn't, a couple of storms since then, it has helped. But the challenge is that the property owners, the majority of the creek here in the neighborhood, if you go to WCAD.org and look at the GIS maps, and you can follow Lake Creek all along and find out where the property owners, the guy behind you goes down to the creek and yours goes down to the creek. It's your property. It's your responsibility to maintain it. So
the Boy Scouts need a project?
Well, the Boy Scout project could be that. But that hasn't, slipped our mind. We know it's an issue. We know it's a concern. But that's the challenge we have in calling the city and say, please come clean out our creek. That's the challenge we have. Anything else? Yes?
What are the creek owners supposed to do?
What's that?
What are they supposed to do? Just keep
debris out?
Okay, well, what are they supposed to do? I'd have to research and see if there's a law or anything. Maybe they're not supposed to do anything. I don't know. I'm not familiar. I'm not an attorney. I'm not familiar with Texas waterway laws, so I'd have to find out. Yes.
Bridge recently, the big tree has fallen into the water.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Is that something the city will?
That may be one of the areas that could be taken care of because it is right there by the bridge, so that's possible. We'll have to look into that. I'll make a note of that. Anybody saw some other hands back there? No? No more? Okay, yes.
Quick one, on addressing your thing about the tree, we live on Lake Creek right behind the high school. And they're, with the drought now, it seems like the banks are sloughing off more, you probably noticed that. And they're crashing over.
Yeah.
And where I live, we were the high dollar houses. We own to the edge of the water. But then there's a green belt on the inside. And the Parks Department loves to call it green belt, but Glenn Neens dedicated all that land as parkland. It was taken over by the city. And if you push and pitch and whine long enough, or the arborist will come out and take it. But they don't want to. They don't even want to pretend that they have parkland back there. And almost all that land along Lake Creek, behind St. William's Loop, and all between Deepwood and Round Rock West is parkland.
That's parkland.
Yeah, you'll have to go through and you look at the maps and it's spotty. It goes through there.
We tried to get a volunteer, like you said, the Boy Scouts. We tried to get a volunteer group to go through and clean up the creek, and we couldn't do it because that's parkland.
Well, and then you're going to run into and then you're going to run into private property issues and liability issues and all kinds of stuff. So I'm not even going to get into that. I'm not an attorney. I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last week, but I'm not even going to try. Okay, that joke's run its course.
Well, Mike, that is the problem we're having with the city, is they just kind of ducking their head on.
Well, okay, I'm going to defend the city here because they have made an effort as best they can within the boundaries that they have to do that. And I talk to them all the time about this. Huh?
Not my backyard.
Okay, well, we'll bring up the dialogue with them about the parkland part of it.
We have consistently, in that neighborhood situation, the only one doing any good is MSU.
Okay.
He doesn't have the budget to do it.
Well, we'll take a look at the maps and see what areas they might be able to do something in and see if we can get them to do it.
We're the worst that will take care of it.
All right, any more questions before we cut loose? Thank everybody for coming out. We appreciate it. Let us know if I can help with anything, get messages out, or if you have any questions or concerns. We'll see if we can find out.